What's going on, YouTubes? Time for a recap. What an exciting day with the move. Holy moly. This morning, we had our over-under set for yesterday's lows, 17,000 on NQ. We will come down to 16,200. Of course, I have my videos out for our recessionary targets coming up to 2026, but we got really close and shied it on the futures, but we did not on the SPY. So remember, as we get into it here, we put out a couple of videos now talking about weekly gaps, right? And I went over this stuff and I said, guys, when a weekly gap hits, stuff goes nuts, okay? So a lot of the times we have abrupt reactions of the opposite way. So let's go look at a couple of weekly gaps here like we did in the last video. Last week gap that closed out here was an all-time high push, came back down, filled it, couple of volatility moves, and off and away she went. Now we see this in a lot of different instances with weekly gaps. Gaps are my number one indicator that I teach with algorithms for the last almost 10 years here on Boiler Room Trading. So this last one right here, 2018, the Trump dump, hit, same thing, launch, here's another one, hit, launch, here's another one, hit, and even to the upside. That was the pandemic. But this one, okay, last one here as well. I forgot about this guy. Another sliver here, hit, launch. So weekly gaps that we've been saying, we put a big old target, and this was our last short target for the bounce 482.13. That's where that weekly gap came in. So let's talk about the big move. Now, news in psychology is generally timed right around technical analysis, oh so perfectly in the matrix that we live in, right? So when we did pop into that gap, right, on the weekly, right here, we had that fill, right? My hotkeys aren't working. There we go. We had that fill 2 days back. Then we had that choppy day. Well, that weekly gap fill, and then we had a couple different algos to work with, was the big precursor. Now, last week's candle for the Fibonacci, we'll go to now and show you that the GP shine was also the key. So we did this in the last video. We said, I don't know, man, that long that we had that accidental long. We shied the weekly GP, which means if we get back inside the GP, we're launching, okay? Perfect technical play out today. So let's break that down. This is last week's high-low, right? 504.91 being the over-under on SPY. Now let's break this down to the daily chart from last week's candle and show you the candle that we're talking about. The last two trade days, right, shied that weekly fib. You can see it a little cleaner on the ES and the NQ when we were talking about it. If you were to fib out the last week's candle and without the gaps and everything else, we'll do the same thing because this is one we were talking about on the last. We'll make another weekly right there, go into the daily. And again, we shied that, right? So the daily opened up, we had that low 48.32 and it pushed up. We got a higher high, but we just quite could not get to that weekly GP, last week's GP, right? So once we were inside the weekly, let's go to the intraday chart, we were going bonkers. And what happened right when we got inside the weekly at 504.91? Because our full long scenario today was long out of the gate to the golden pocket. That's what we played. And then I said chop till FOMC Trumpster. Here you go. Long golden pocket out of the gate from yesterday, 502.81. Chop to the FOMC. And this is what I said last night in our stream too. Generally, we'll get one move and then nothing sandwich until FOMC. Exactly what we've seen. I don't like trading these days because it has a really boring range until FOMC. So we usually take a relax. And then like something like this comes on. And all you DJing and gamblers, a lot of my members in chat and Discord posting their here's P&Ls. Congrats to you guys on the gambles on those options where you guys are going up. But, you know, we did come from that weekly fill we talked about, and upside was predominantly all we were looking for. What was that last key we went over in the last two videos? Well, that was also the floater candle right here when we discussed that multiple gaps above and below. These are very strong candles. So we also drew a fib high-low to this guy, and we said, yeah, the fib recycle is going to be pretty nuts on this one as well. So if I draw a fib to the downside, this also lined up with a recovery of our 423.60 and 3618. Now, if you zoom in real close, we did this today, actually, and this is another big reason that we took the trade. Let's move this over here a little bit. This is this colorful fib that we just made is the gap floater, right? So we come over to here, notice that the 3618 and yesterday's high-low is an absolute perfect overlap. So the 3618 and the 50 fib from yesterday, just a perfect overlap, right? And then once a fib cycles to the downside, you can look for the upside. So on that daily floater, you see it obviously gapped through the 1618, plowed through the 2618, broke all the way down, had that big volatility scare, filled the weekly gap, and then again, once it recovered 500, which lo and behold, the 423.60 fib from the floater candle just happens to be the perfect $500 psychological. That's another big recovery point. Look where that caused the squeezes intraday. These are just algorithms. So boom, 500, boom, causing the squeeze. And even an algo intraday that came all the way back down and almost kissed that 500 again. So again, we know that 500 is a very premium level, but the Fibonacci and perfectly timed news after the weekly gap fill here just happens to play out magically, right? So how would we have played this? Let's go over a couple little tiny things here, because we did go over all the weekly daily stuff, and now we just have this monster green candle. Well, no big deal. We had a lot of gaps to fill, and we like to go back to the GP. So when we fibbed out this guy, came all the way down, shot back up, and lo and behold, if I remove the weekly, you can again see how perfect Fibonacci overlap happens. Here's yesterday's high-low, planning for today's day trade. Look where it topped out, 1618. Didn't quite get the secondary gap fill, but she blew past the first one, which is perfect. So if you just would have used, again, our favorite strategy of the day prior's Fibonacci high-low, we went long from yesterday's lows to the GP, waited till the FOMC, slam, and we missed it by a couple pennies there, but of course, after hours ticked into it absolutely perfect. Well, what's the scenario now? Well, I like to come into these big days, even when we get the intraday algos, and I'll go to the 15-minute chart and I'll start paying attention to the golden pocket tags. Now, I wasn't here watching this one, so I don't know if that was an algo tag or if this was a absolute order. Who knows? This is a print or not. Generally speaking, intraday algos during the Trump administration get pretty common. So we can fib that one out. I'm going to fib out the one before it. This is the 15-minute, obviously the first little bam, FOMC action, and we're going to fib that up to the upside. Now, that is a pretty big candle, and continuation to the upside, at least to the upper gap fill, should happen. Now, the two scenarios, unfortunately, that we have for the long term is we were talking about before this fall apart, we have multiple algo systems telling us that we're going to come back up here to the 560s, 580s. Of course, not going to happen tomorrow or anything like that, right? But we do have algo systems that are open up here to fill in some of the gaps. Most specifically, we have some of these right here and right here. We have intraday algorithms, okay? And we have a no tag GP. So this dead cat bounce, I'm going to give you where the top range should come in, even on exhaustion. That GP right here. So we have a candle with no golden pocket. And of course, that golden pocket is when you draw a Fibonacci from high-low like we always do here, right? And then you don't have a tag of that center, right? 3820 to 6218. So this candle is very unique because it has a GP no tag that we just discussed, hitting the 100 EMA as well. If you take this candle, right, slide that guy over to the right. Last example here for how clean my algorithmic moves are. Look where the 666 is from this candle. Isn't that insane? This is the last and farthest algorithmic extension that I use for reasons I cannot give you guys out here, but look at where the bottom was for the 666. Come on, guys. And we knew exactly where to drop because of the moving average, because of the no GP. It's very amazing to see the algorithms work out. Now, we do have a reason to get up to that 100 EMA, but now let's see, how are we going to get up there? Now, the only thing we got to worry about here for tomorrow is the gap. So we have this monster gap from yesterday's highs. Well, we could just gap up the whole thing right here, and we pushed in. Generally speaking, we don't fill a double gap. We filled the one yesterday right away, or filled it today rather. We filled the single gap, but we did not quite get to this gap right here to the fill, right? 554.77. That's going to be the interesting point for futures. Now, is futures going to open up and just do this all day and just wait for that premium, one of those grind days where we go up, or do we actually get a little bit of a relax and come back down? Well, the over under for me is going to be right around 550 for the last remaining data of this gap on the daily chart that we fibbed out, and I need to know if that's going to be above or below. So the best case scenario for us, because we do have a lot of besides this intraday algo, we don't really know what it is. These are no tags, right? So we have this one big fat no tag GP here on the 5 minute right here. But this long algo, also comes into play for its GP. They're actually in the same spot. So in the scenario of what are we going to do? Well, if we look real close at yesterday's high-low, that's the gold as always, the live trading session actually did not hit 547.57. We missed it, right? So the tag of 1618 tomorrow is my number one algorithmic watch. And I don't care if we're above it, or below it. I need it to come back to the 1618 regardless of where price action is. Now, there are scenarios where if we get big squeezes, big tariff pause news, is the end of the world in 2 seconds. And of course, Trump set up the whole world for 100% tariffs Wednesday. Yeah, right. Come on. That was never going to go through. Let's be honest. You just tagged a weekly gap, the biggest algorithmic technical analysis system that we've used for a decade teaching live for this stuff. It's not going to happen. We've never seen that. So is it going to either open over the gap, come down, fill, leave a double gap, because that's still numero uno, or two rather, not number one. Number one scenario would be to open up hopefully underneath and come into that 1618, and then we can get some static consolidation before you go. Option two is going to be a fast-paced squeeze, and we're going to have to worry about this GP right here. This is going to be your over-under, unfortunately, because that 550, if we don't hover right around there and tag that 1618, we're going to end up on a double where we leave this gap open and we create another one from today's highs. And then we end up opening way up into the 560s, 570s, and then do a pressure push up candle to the 100 EMA, which we said needed a magnet back test because, again, cracked it here, came back up, shied it, no tag, had the capitulation event, now coming back up to tag that 100 EMA again because we need a back test of that moving average, right? Also, the 10 is now mounted. So if this is the big break, we're going to have to watch the gaps. I really, unfortunately, don't have too much else. We hit the golden pockets, and we have that gold extension from, I just deleted it from yesterday, to help us out with that 1618 tag, but we're also going to have to be very cautious of that candle. If you want to trade the futures tonight, and we're going to see which way it goes. It's either going to double gap and chase that 100 EMA or not. I would put out, and again, the same thing happened here, 1618, 19,200. I think we're going to get some very quick upside here. Go to a default real quick just for the NQs. And if we do open up, because NQ generally doesn't leave a bunch of daily gaps on here, we do have that weekly gap that we got to worry about, but same kind of candling right here. Now notice this dude right here, he has a no GP on him, right? He has a 10 SMA associated with this candle. It's the blue level. Not too shabby. So if we open up, we're going to be opening up very high, right? Obviously. 19,000, big psychological. And of course, a golden pocket that needs to be tagged right above. So unfortunately, a lot of the times you see a pressure push back up where you get another gap on the NQ at this open, and then it ends up above this GP, down and go. That'll be it, honestly. If it opens up low, pray for the 19,000 hold, and then you can get up to the GP. If it opens up in the GP, those are just going to be your first tags. The ES has more of a specific target that we put out as well, and that's the gap fill. So remember last week's trade session, the start, we had this gap. And on the other charts, we've been watching this futures gap because we're going to be coming back up to 5575. That's the other reason why we could see that happen right away on ES. Okay. So again, we're holding that GP. And if we do happen to cycle back up or even open up into the gap, we will need to push into 5580 tomorrow. And that would be a great reason to fill the gap. Now, the Fibonacci points that we have here, that's that weekly that we just drew. Well, let's delete that real fast. This daily gap is the one we'll be targeting for ES tomorrow. So, or tonight, rather, I guess, 5 p.m. At the open. So what I would like to see is if any action holds yesterday's highs, you are going to continue this parabolic move. If for some odd reason it gives you the best open ever, which means it opens in line. So the close and the open are generally the same. So here's yesterday's close, quote unquote, what we just closed on. Well, 15 minutes away. And we have a resting hour, 5 p.m. Central opens back up. We need to hold above yesterday's close and highs and make that push right away to the gap fill. That would be perfect. But the ES has to open right here at yesterday's close. It has to generally just do this and then fill the gap if we can get that, great. If it starts in a gap up, we're just going to have to play candle by candle, gap down. Just going to have to play candle by candle and play it by year, but we're going to be watching those GPs. I want you guys to have these GPs on as well. We have some very high static GPs that are wide open, and when these candles have no golden pockets on them, we like to utilize those Look to the right, and oh, look at that. We already found a confluence point of the fibbies. So if we do hold, I will guess 5,500 for a big psychological level, which we pretty much closed just on 55. Was that 07 or so? Very close to. Again, 15 minutes, but we'll be closing right here. But if we do happen to hold that 5,500 and push back up, we have the 2618 from that fib we just made on the 5-minute with no GP, right? Screaming back up. What's our rules? Actually, this fib's actually looking good for continuation. Let's talk about why. This 5-minute high-low, we draw the box. It moves up to the 1618. Good hit. Comes down to the 100 generally, and then moves up to the 1618 to break out to the 2618. We have seen all of this sequence already. If you zoom in really close, though, did we actually come back to the high of the no GP? Sure didn't. After we tag that 1618. Generally, the rules speaking is when we hit the 1618, we come back to the 100 before we launch ourselves back up. That is just standard Fibonacci extension practice for us. That is what we have accumulated for over the years of doing this. And when you don't see a hit like that, where the high that you drew, can you see that? Okay. The high that you drew for that 5-minute did not come back and back to support for the launch back up here, we could actually see that as well. So we do have to remember this level right here at 52.95.45, that big boy down here needs a back test at some point. Doesn't have to happen right away. That is not a short call to come down here right away and flop. If we see the structure breaks set up in the volume to do so, hell yeah, let's take it. But I'm going to worry about the gap on top of this for the ES open, watch the close, push into this gap and the 2618 before anything else. I'm not going to look for anything short at the moment, because right when we open up, again, we have some GPs up here, even a 50 here. And I think we have one 1-minute, that one filled right here. This one right here, that's the same candle. 3-3? Yep, 3-3. So 3-3 is one of those ending points for our dead cat bounce. Now, of course, putting in the candle like this, are we going to gap and go? Or are we just going to cruise up? I have no idea. Let's play it by ear. Let's see what the open is, but pay attention to those gaps. Pay attention to those GPs. If you want to come hang out with us and chat, link is in the description. You want to win a Top Step account, because we give $50 away every Saturday during our live lesson, or actually 100. We give away multiple accounts. You can use it for whatever you like. Drop a comment, make sure you're subscribed, and that all that does is enter you in, and hit us up on Saturday when you win that PayPal, Venmo. If you want to just tune in for the next YouTube, leave a comment for what you want me to cover next, and I will. You guys take care. Trade safe.